co-main event is just the fight before the main event.
Oh, okay. So that one, only once in a while they have 2 5-round fights. And
Yeah,
then
so there's 2 title fights on the card,
right?
so those are both 5-round fights. But
Gotcha.
the co-main event isn't necessarily always a 5-round fight.
Did you say Craig? All right, here we go. Just to mess with everybody. Everybody's got their hand on the steering wheel today. It is your old pal EMac. I'm joined by one Greg Ehrenberg as we are back for Live Before Lock. It's a very fun day, but I got to go right to the jump, cut to the chase, if you will. We have a promo that is running out in 28 minutes. That is the MMA Sims promo code 297 in honor of the event tonight. You get 30% off the Sims package for MMA. You're going to want to jump in there and get that. It has all sorts of bells and whistles. It's a great way to determine if your lineups are going to be duped and how duped will they be, because that is always a challenge in a sport like MMA where you can only make 6 choices over there on DraftKings. So check that out. Promo code 297, 30% off your first payment. All righty. We've got a little bit of news here, Greg. A few things have changed since we did the earlier show. We have Joel Embiid has popped up onto the injury report. He is now questionable. We have Zach Collins off the injury report. There was thoughts that he may rest tonight after being out for 10 games and then playing last night. It has been confirmed that Victor Wembanyama is in. Daniel Gafford will be out. Surprise, though not a huge surprise, but a bit of a surprise, LaMelo Ball is also going to be out. He's dealing with a sore ankle. We got some confirmation and cleaned up the rest of the Hornets. There will be no Nick Richards, no Mo Bamba, yes to Bryce McGowan's on the Philly side. In addition to Joel Embiid becoming questionable, we did get confirmation that Jaden Springer will be out and that Mo Bamba is out, plus Pat Beverly out with an illness. So a lot of moving parts there for Philly. Over on the Atlanta side, we did have Bogdan Bogdanovic appeared on the injury report. He is dealing with the sore ankle. Let's see. We're still waiting on Karis LeVert, doubtful, though we don't think he is going to play. And then Trae Young, still questionable with an illness. He missed last night's game. Out of nowhere from the top rope, Otto Porter apparently available. There is a rule that there can only be 3 Porter Juniors in the league at any one time, but at least one of them has to be hurt. So that's a little bit dangerous tonight because Craig Porter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and Michael Porter Jr. are now at risk. Who got bounced from the league? Oh, that would be Kevin Porter Jr. How do you have 4 Porter Juniors, Greg? And none of them are related to each other. Isn't that kind of weird?
So the way that it happens is because there are multiple people in the Porter is a fairly common last name, is it not?
But like, you get the joke, Porter Juniors.
If we
but
go,
they're not related to each other.
If we go through all of the Porters, it's got to, how many last names are more popular? We got maybe Thomas, Williams, Johnson.
Davis,
Porter's
Smith.
Probably in the top 10 or so. And I figure a lot of them probably have kids that are named after them, and therefore we got some Porters in the league. Is Jonte Porter Porter Jr. as well?
Jonte Porter's brother is.
Right.
Is,
well, who knows? But maybe his mom is Jonte Porter, and then he could still be Jonte Porter Jr., right?
There we go.
Why don't people do that?
And then he would be related.
Have you ever realized that?
I did not. That is actually a new wrinkle, Greg.
So I'm saying I've never realized that it's, fairly commonplace for there to be men that are named after their fathers that are juniors. I don't think I've ever seen it with a girl before, though.
I have not, to my knowledge. I've seen girls in like family names where they pass down the names, but they don't get at the suffix there on the end. Interesting. It's interesting.
George Foreman has like 13 kids and he named them all George, boys and girls.
That I do know. All right. I am trying to chat says my mic is off a little bit. So let's take a peek here. No, I'm voting it's going to be good. I'm going to bump it up just a little bit there, Mike. So you can give me the thumbs up if that works out. Gave it about a 10% boost. But back to our injury reports. Lugens Dortz will be in. He was dealing with an illness yesterday. We don't have Derrick Rose. We also do not have Levine. He is out, but we do have Ayo Dosunmu and Andre Drummond. They were both questionable earlier, but they're in. And then Reggie Bullock was ruled out. I think that hits everybody. Oh, Josh Hart is available tonight I think that covers all of the moving parts here. So the big ones we're still waiting on, of course, are going to be Embiid
Yep.
and Trae Young and
Correct.
Bogdanovic. So
Yeah, and by the way, my best guess, I do think Joel Embiid is going to sit today, but this always drives me crazy. How does somebody get listed as questionable due to rest, and you don't? How could somebody be a game time decision due to rest? You either know if you're resting somebody or not. It's a decision you're making about whether to sit him out. I know that this is kind of hack at this point because I brought it up how many times over the course of the season, but it drives me crazy. How can you not? How can you decide that somebody's a game time decision due to rest? Just tell us whether you're playing him or not.
but Greg, you're the infamous one that says everybody's a game time decision.
I don't think I've ever said that before. I could
thought
take
that
it on now. That's a Bill Belichick thing. Bill Belichick, there was a point in time where Bill Belichick used to fuck with the injury reports and he would list everybody as questionable. And this was when I think the NFL first started to crack down on some of the injury reporting stuff. So he listed everybody on the team as questionable because he said, how do I know that somebody won't fall off the bus and roll their ankle? So he literally did one time determine that everybody on the team was a game time decision because you don't know if somebody's going to fall off the bus.
All right. All right. Back to our sport here, but a quick update. Baltimore 10, Houston 10. These guys are laughing at the top of my head. This is a virtual backdrop. I'm not out in our main room, so I just have a virtual backdrop here. I did have the light on behind me, which made this even worse. But
Can you put it on?
Do you want me to put the light on? No, that's too much internet fun.
Okay. By the way, also, I don't believe a single thing you say. I think you're locked in an insane asylum right now doing a DFS show, and that is not a virtual background.
Well, that could be true, Greg. That actually could be true. But I always like a more realistic background than just here we are in a room. And yes, I've got now. It looks like I've got the little beanie above my head. I am in Florida, so we could go with with this look here. Do you like it? Do you like the flamingos? The blurring, it's just kind of weird. Although it doesn't make my head disappear. But I just downloaded this one from the internet, so we're going with that. Or we could go back to the holidays. All right, let's talk basketball here. We've got 55 minutes until lock, and that means you guys have 20 minutes left to use that promo code 297. That will get you 30% off the Stochastic Max Sims package. But let's start looking here and seeing what's coming in. So across the top here, Greg, earlier today we both liked Şengün. We both liked Spider, Donovan Mitchell. Has that changed much for you? I noticed I was not getting as much Şengün as I would have thought when I was building out my lineups, Yahoo in particular. So I kind of had to nudge him to get him into that lineup that I'm building over there. But and we do have the Marvin Bagley news confirmed as well. So is it a 2-center night for you?
So yes, I'm getting to a whole ton of Şengün. He's my second most roster center on both DraftKings and FanDuel. The only player with center eligibility that I'm getting to more than him is Marvin Bagley. And the reason we get to so much Marvin Bagley, the same reason we played Bagley the other night, is because Daniel Gafford is out for the Wizards. And we talked about the situation this morning as well, EMac. And one of the reasons that, while I do get Şengün as my second most rostered center earlier in the day, he was actually my most rostered center, if I remember correctly. But the reason that Bagley ends up passing him in terms of center exposures and what also makes him just such a strong play overall on the slate is because who the hell else is going to play the center minutes for Washington now that there is no Daniel Gafford out there for them? So Gafford, when we were doing the show earlier in the day, was listed as questionable. We talked about what would happen if Gafford ultimately didn't end up playing. And we'd said what was going to happen is Marvin Bagley was going to move into the starting lineup and play a bunch of minutes because we've already seen this scenario. Last game, Marvin Bagley made his debut with the Wizards, plays 39 minutes in that game against the Knicks. Very first game with the team. Thrust into starting lineup, has to play nearly the entire game because they don't have other bigs to go to. If we look at the other guys on the depth chart, like Patrick Baldwin, sure, he could play some center minutes, but beyond that, the only other option is to go small, and you're not going to go small playing up against the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama. So I'm not saying we have to expect Marvin Bagley to play 40 minutes again like he did last time. But you don't need 40 minutes out of Marvin Bagley for him to project as one of the top value plays on the slate. So Bagley, pretty clear guy to get to. You asked me about Şengün. Still like Şengün a lot, but Bagley I get to more of just because he's such an exceptional value.
All right, and then is that kind of back our way into the answer that Capanicella has here, asking for his one guy in a DK single entry. I did make sure that I'm doing one on Yahoo, and I made sure I had Mitchell and Şengün were the two I wanted to build around tonight.
Yeah. So different ways, and we can answer these questions however we want. If you had to play just like one guy to lock into lineups, it's got to be Marvin Bagley. But when Capanicella asks me about favorite single entry play, I do usually try to find somebody who's lower owned that could differentiate that lineup a little bit. So single entry, no brainer, right? We're all going to be playing Marvin Bagley in those kind of contests. He's going to be probably 80+% owned in single entry contests today. Lower owned player.
Do you want to answer the Hef Love question? He does have an MMA question here.
Oh, I was going to finish answering the Capanicella question.
Oh, sorry. Well,
yeah.
This is you are the captain now.
Great. No, it's fine. You can keep steering the ship. It's just we'll answer one question at a time. It's like how you got confused by
sailor here. We're going in circles, Greg.
It's like how you got confused by the co-main events before, and it's like, yeah, just everybody fights at once. They throw everybody in the octagon at once, and it's
the battle royale. Familiar with that one?
Okay. There is. If anybody ever wants entertainment, look up Fight Circus. There is this YouTube channel. It is just nonsense where it's like there's team fights. It's 5-on-5s. They'll do stuff where it's like how many dwarves will it take to beat a heavyweight, and they'll do like 5-on-1. It's the most insane stuff ever. And if you are ever not sober and you're looking for something to watch in bed, that's my shit right there. Look.
Wait, is it real people or is it like a computer simulation?
No, it's real people. It's real people, and they'll do all kinds of weird stuff. Like there was one. It was a actual professional women's MMA fighter, not like highly credentialed, but somebody who's an actual pro fighter, took on this like 500-pound alcoholic guy out of the crowd who was fighting for a case of beer. I'm just saying there's endless entertainment if you look for crazy MMA fights online. But that aside, for Capanicella's question, so for a single entry play who I think has upside that the field isn't getting to, I hate to give this as an answer, but I do think it's the right one. Jordan Poole, only project for 13% ownership. I get well overweight to the field on Jordan Poole in my lineups. He has been terrible this year. No doubt about it. He is not playing well, but there have been some promising signs. Like he showed actual upside over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen his usage see an uptick as well. So a big problem with Jordan Poole, when we saw the downtick in his production, it's not just that he wasn't producing fantasy points, but there was no real way to project him to score more because his minutes were down a little bit, and he wasn't shooting shots, which I didn't think was a possibility for Jordan Poole. But over the course of the last handful of games, 29% usage rate, 31%, 27.5%, 22%, 28.5%. I think that Jordan Poole is the top contrarian option on the slate. Extreme boomer bust option, but if he's going to maintain a usage upwards of like the high 20s, 30%, there's a real ceiling for him at low ownership.
All right. Does that hit your question? You want to get that MMA one out of the way?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We could move on to other questions. If you want, we could read like all the questions at once and we'll figure out how to answer them. But yeah. Hit me with
hold on. I got to get my notepad. Oh, the notepad won't show up.
No, it went invisible.
I'm old school here. I don't have a pen at my desk, so I'd have to go get a pen. The MMA question is Tavares, Allen, or Flick?
Okay, so for MMA, yeah, so I'm really high on Jimmy Flick for the UFC slate solely because there's going to be a ton of ownership going to Malcolm Gordon. And I don't know how much people want me to do analysis of a UFC fight here, but basically, one of the things that really drives ownership in MMA is the betting odds, and books are very bad at handicapping MMA. And there is a fight between Malcolm Gordon and Jimmy Flick. It opened up as a pick'em fight at the sports book, and it has been bet really heavily in favor of Gordon. So we now have Gordon is close to actually north of in some spots a -200 favorite. So with that being the case, and I don't agree with the betting line, Gordon is going to be massive chalk on the slate, and I think the fight should be close to a pick'em. So I like Jimmy Flick for leverage.
Right. And then if Embiid were to be ruled out, would you prefer Maxey or still Donovan Mitchell?
Ooh, okay. So they're in well different price ranges. The answer is both, right? So if there is a scenario where Joel Embiid doesn't play, which I do think is the most likely scenario, I want to play Tyrese Maxey, but it doesn't mean I can't play Donovan Mitchell. I think they'd both be really strong options. Donovan Mitchell's usage has been absurd as of late. And now also we've got Karis LeVert out for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Look at the usage rate in recent games. for Donovan Mitchell, 36%, 31%, 46%, 27, 36, 36, 31, 31. And now also, like I said, we're taking Karis LeVert off the court. The assist rate has been there as well for Donovan Mitchell. So the answer is both. I would still prioritize Mitchell over Maxey, but two really strong options if there is no Embiid.
All right. And then how do you feel about Kelly Oubre Jr.? He's another person that started sliding into some of the lineups here since we lost Pat Beverly and confirmed a couple other Philadelphia 76ers out.
Yeah, so let's also go ahead and look at some of the on-off court numbers for the 76ers, because Kelly Oubre is somebody who is in play. Don't go too close to the light there, EMac. We know that you're at an advanced day. I just saw you light up all of a sudden. I thought you were at risk. Kelly Oubre is somebody who I think is viable right now. He looks stronger on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings, but he's somebody who, if Joel Embiid is ruled out, we are going to really want to load up on a lot of 76ers players. And one of the ones that would stand out the most for sure is Kelly Oubre. So pulling up the on-off court numbers for the 76ers this year when Joel Embiid is off the court, we have Tyrese Maxey leading the team with a 32.6% usage rate. I'm not exactly sure why, but I see this narrative all the time that Tyrese Maxey is worse without Joel Embiid, which is absolutely not the case from a fantasy standpoint. So 32.6% usage rate for Tyrese Maxey this year with Joel Embiid off the court. Tobias Harris, 25.4% usage rate. And then we have Kelly Oubre third on the team with a 22% usage rate with Joel Embiid off the court. Then if we go ahead and see how that converts to fantasy production, Tyrese Maxey leads the team with a 1.29 fantasy point per minute for DraftKings rate with Joel Embiid off the court, 1.27 over on FanDuel. Then we've got Tobias Harris, 1.1 fantasy points on each site. And then Kelly Oubre, 0.88 DraftKings points per minute, 0.89 FanDuel points per minute without Joel Embiid. But if there is no Embiid, and like you said, Beverly out as well, we could expect there to be extra minutes to go to Kelly Oubre. So he would certainly look stronger if Joel Embiid isn't out there.
Would you downgrade Şengün at that point if Embiid is, well, if you're assuming that, if you do get the confirmation, does the Şengün potentially become a casualty as you go more towards Maxey? Or where are you trying to land on Maxey now?
Well, it depends if Joel Embiid is out, right? Because as of right now, Maxey is not somebody that really matters to me at all. Let's see. How many lineups do I have with Maxey at the moment? On DraftKings, out of my top 150 lineups, none of them have Tyrese Maxey. Yeah. On FanDuel, of my top 150 lineups, 4 of them have Tyrese Maxey. So he is somebody who is a very strong option if Joel Embiid is out. If Joel Embiid is in, though, which I think the most likely scenario is that Embiid sits today. But if Joel Embiid does end up playing, not going to get to Maxey. And then we'll see. If Embiid is ruled out, I'll have an update on how much Maxey I end up getting to in that scenario. For right now, though, none of Maxey, really.
All right, you ready for a few super chats?
Yes, sir.
Noah Levinson, $1.99 says, what is your best bet for UFC tonight?
All right, so I'm going to give a quick answer here so that people don't get upset by me talking about MMA for half the show. But I'm going to go back to Jimmy Flick. I bet him at plus 172 because reasons I mentioned before. I think the line is too wide. So Jimmy Flick plus 172 on the money line.
All right. How are we feeling about our best plays per position on DraftKings right now?
On DraftKings, I think you meant, it's fun. We got super chats for DraftKings and FanDuel. So we had Sean left us a super chat, best plays each position on DK. And then Jade Trong asked best on FanDuel. So I'll do it for both. Right. I'll start with DraftKings, where DraftKings at point guard, Jordan Poole, guy who I'm getting well overweight to the field to. Shooting guard, I'll go Donovan Mitchell. Small forward, Patrick Williams. Power forward, also be Patrick Williams. So I'll mix it up. Small forward, I'll go with Brandon Miller. Power forward, Patrick Williams. And then at center, Marvin Bagley. And now for FanDuel, to answer both the super chats, FanDuel at point guard for me, that is currently Cody Martin. At shooting guard, we'll go with Donovan Mitchell. Small forward, Brandon Miller. Power forward, Marvin Bagley. And then center, Şengün.
Do you want to add in any additional analysis there on Brandon Miller as one of the few men standing still for Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple. It's that LaMelo Ball is out for this team, and he carries such a big role in the offense for the Charlotte Hornets that if you're going to take LaMelo off the court, I'll pull up these numbers as well, then you have a lot of playing time as well as usage to allocate to other players. One thing I'm actually a little upset about this morning, EMac, is that I did not guess that LaMelo was live to sit. I know he wasn't on the injury report, but usually we're able to figure out which guys are, like fairly likely to play or sit in these kind of scenarios. And it never crossed my mind that we might see LaMelo end up sitting tonight. But looking at the usage ratings for players on the Charlotte Hornets with LaMelo off the court this year, and Brandon Miller is third on the team of players that actually matter as far as usage without LaMelo. So Terry Rozier leads the Hornets with a 27.8% usage rate when ball is off the court. Then we have Miles Bridges at 25%. Coming in after that is Brandon Miller, third on the team with a 23.4% usage rate. And then also looking at the fantasy production, Brandon Miller, 0.86 fantasy points per minute with LaMelo off the court. Bridges, 1.03 fantasy points. Rozier, 1.22 fantasy points per minute this season with LaMelo ball off the court. So that's why guys from the Hornets look really good. LaMelo's out. Some rumors, by the way, that Bridges is going to be traded. Going to be interesting to see how his off-court issues are going to impact his potential trade value. But the Hornets are apparently trying to move off him.
All righty, we did get the San Antonio lineup confirmed. It's going to be Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Champagny, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama as expected. All right, one last super chat here. This is Pierre. He's asking large field GPP. Do you have a favorite player at each position?
Pierre, large field. Yeah, I just answered that.
Oh, sorry. Oh, well,
it was the same. So it was we kind of got the same super chat twice. It was Pierre and Jade Trong both asked for my favorite plays at each position on FanDuel. So hit them both there. Okay. If you guys have any other questions you want to ask, throw it into the YouTube chat and I'll answer those because we did get the same super chat that came in twice.
Yep, that's always Greg is always fair to everybody. Surprisingly. Shocking.
Some people got very upset, very, very upset that I answered the MMA question. But what could I do? The guy paid money to leave a question. I answered it. It is what it is.
It is what it is. It is what it is. All righty. No other news has really run in here. Any players at the moment before the slate gets turned on its head that you feel are going overlooked in the large field tournaments tonight?
Sure. So one of them, Jordan Poole, man who I was talking about before. I think that he is certainly one of them. Donovan Mitchell's another one. I'm kind of surprised that he's not projected for higher ownership. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in higher owned than what his ownership projection is. We do have him projected for sub 20% ownership. So I'm getting fairly overweight to the field on Donovan Mitchell, but I do think there's a pretty good chance he ends up being more popular than what that number is. Just kind of a hunch on my part. Sometimes I look at the ownership projections, and this is very by the way, Patrick Williams ruled in. He was questionable to play. So he's a top value play. We can now have him confirmed in. Very unscientific, but every once in a while I'll look at projected ownership. You're like, that doesn't feel quite right to me. That's kind of how I feel about Donovan Mitchell. But if Mitchell actually does come in at sub 20% ownership, he's quite a bit under-owned on the slate. And then Joel Embiid, if he plays, as I know I'm giving a couple of pay-up options here, but Donovan Mitchell looks under-owned. And Joel Embiid, if he does actually happen to end up playing, people aren't really getting to him in any kind of meaningful way. Great match for him against the Charlotte Hornets. So he should eat in this matchup if he ends up playing.
All right. And then a Craig Porter Jr. sighting here. BJ's asking about that. I wasn't getting any in my lineups yet. I'm just now turning my attention here to DraftKings. He wasn't even on the radar over there on Yahoo. Plenty of other $10 plays I'd rather go with. But how are you feeling about Craig Porter Jr.?
Yeah, and we had a couple people ask about Craig Porter Jr. We had Kevin Cash App wanted to know how much of a dart throw would Craig Porter Jr. over Sam Merrill be, and then also BJJJJ asked how much Craig Porter Jr. am I getting to? Yeah, so Craig Porter Jr. is definitely somebody who could benefit from the absence of Karis LeVert. The primary value option to get to is Sam Merrill, but I don't hate going to Craig Porter Jr. at all. He's in 20% of my lineups in DraftKings right now. Over on FanDuel, Porter is 4,900 and is not showing up as meaningfully for me. Yeah, so I hardly get to Craig Porter Jr. at all on FanDuel, but just difference in prices. He's $4,900 over on FanDuel, whereas on DraftKings, he's $3,600. So Craig Porter Jr. definitely stands to benefit from this Cavs situation with Karis LeVert being out. Not somebody who you want to make as like a core play in your lineups or anything, but I do like being overweight to the field to him.
All right. And then James Parkins asking, good question. We haven't really hit on the spicy matchup of the night. And then we got a request for the nuke of the night. The spicy matchup of the night is going to be Toronto and New York because, of course, they completed that trade about 3 weeks ago. I was messaging old friend of the show, T. McBee, asking him his thoughts on that as well. And he said he thought that that Barrett and Quickly would kind of want to show out just a little bit here. I could see Brunson being willing to engage in an up and down game here. But the key thing we need to remember about that game, since OG Anunoby has joined the Toronto, or pardon me, left Toronto and joined the Knicks, they have the lowest defensive efficiency rating in the league. They're allowing 104.1 points per game. They also have, I think, the best or the second best rebounding percentage in that time frame. So he's really dramatically gotten that lineup back. He's was acted as the catalyst to get it back more towards what Thibodeau really likes to see. But how are you feeling about the spicy matchup of the night?
So I'll let you make up the parameters, EMac. What is the spicy matchup of the night?
Well, I don't think anything can top Lee's Taco Bell play tonight, so I'm afraid to even intend it because, well, just a little back and forth. I think that's a good one. I think relatives going against each other. So we have the Trey Jones and Tyus Jones, the brother versus brother matchup tonight, especially if they're going to play. It's a little more exciting. Not as much fun when the Morris twins are meandering about, waving to each other from opposite benches. Similarly, unless Robin Lopez is going to help Brooke fight the mascot, they never really played each other too often over the last 6-7 years. So I don't have a good makeup one for that.
Okay, sorry. So I am going to go with the game that I have the most exposure to, and I presume that I might even getting more exposure to in short order if Joel Embiid is ruled out, which is the Charlotte Hornets Philadelphia 76ers game. And there's a lot of slates. I don't love loading up on the first game of the slate. Did it yesterday also in a game that involved the Charlotte Hornets and the San Antonio Spurs. And parts of that game were very, very needed on yesterday's slate. And for today, we've got LaMelo Ball out, so there's a lot to like from the Charlotte Hornets side of the game. And then if Joel Embiid is ruled out for the 76ers, that's going to open up a whole host of value on the Philly side. So with that in mind, I think the spicy matchup is a game between the Hornets and the 76ers that we're going to want to get a bunch of exposure to.
All right. Just iterations of similar questions here. More Craig Porter Jr. questions. I must be missing out on this Craig Porter Jr. love. Isn't he like a 0.6 or 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy? I thought he was kind of on the lower side of things.
Let's see. Craig Porter Jr. this year. He's had some pretty big games when players have been out and he's had to step up. But also keep in mind, as I'm pulling up these numbers here, when it comes to Craig Porter Jr., that he's in a very strong matchup against the Atlanta Hawks. But in addition to that, Karis LeVert is out, Darius Garland's out. So we're taking other guys who we would potentially be sharing the ball with off the court. And actually, no, Craig Porter Jr. is averaging over a fantasy point per minute this year.
Okay, I clearly I stand corrected. I had sort of bucketed him into that nebulous Shetty Osman type Cleveland Cavalier that we end up forcing into lineups when they're cheap from the last few years. So clearly he is a much better play than that one. All right.
Joel Embiid is in, by the way. Joel Embiid is in. So this is going to create an interesting scenario here because the game starts in 30 minutes. We've seen the field is much quicker to react to these kinds of news in 2024 than they were in previous years. So it could impact the ownership a little bit of Joel Embiid. It would have definitely impacted if this came out like 5 minutes before lock or something like that. But with Joel Embiid in, here's something that this really does. We're getting questioned about Tyrese Maxey before, and we talked about the potential of him being a strong option if Embiid is out. Well, don't really want to get to Tyrese Maxey with Joel Embiid in, but I do want to ask Rich something. And Rich, if you wouldn't mind coming in, and Mike, if you could throw Rich on screen for this. What kind of concerns, if any, do you have about Joel Embiid's playing time, this being a tail end of a back-to-back and him missing a handful of games?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that because of how many games Joel Embiid has missed already and how he could become ineligible for the end of season rewards, that instead of them just fully sitting him, they might go to they might rest him and only play him 25 to 28 minutes or something. However, if you're playing DFS, I don't think it would really pay off to play like that. I think if he's playing, you have to assume he's full go. He's in a great spot, great matchup. So me personally, I'm going to be playing the heck out of Joel Embiid. Also assuming that the field's probably a little hesitant for those same reasons I just mentioned.
Yeah, and Joel Embiid, for reference in my lineups, I have Joel Embiid in 25% of them over on DraftKings, making him my third most rostered center. The only centers that I'm getting more exposure to than Joel Embiid are Marvin Bagley and Alperen Şengün. That is for DraftKings. And then if I move over to FanDuel, it's actually the exact same deal. I have a little bit more of Joel Embiid on FanDuel than DraftKings. I actually got to him in 27% of lineups. The two centers I have more exposure to him over there, Marvin Bagley, Alperen Şengün, same two guys. So I've got the same three top centers in the same exact order on FanDuel and DraftKings that I'm getting to. So I like the upside of Joel Embiid. We'll see what his ownership ends up coming in at.
Yep, and then we do have the starting lineup here for Charlotte. It's going to be Rozier, Miller, Martin. That'd be Cody, Bridges, and Washington. That is as expected. And then Karis LeVert officially ruled out.
Yeah, Karis LeVert is going to be out. He was listed as doubtful, so that doesn't really change anything for us. And then PJ Washington, we saw him start at center yesterday and could have had he had a very good game relative to his price. He was one of the better overall value plays going into the slate. Ends up being solid. Puts up 30 fantasy points yesterday, but also dealt with a good deal of foul trouble. So we saw PJ Washington pick up his fourth foul fairly early in the third quarter, forced him to go to the bench. And I do think that we are going to see PJ Washington, if he could avoid foul trouble, play more minutes today. Now, the matchup he has against Joel Embiid, it's a difficult one, and he could certainly find himself into foul trouble. I thought there was a chance they might have started Nathan Mensah at center just to avoid fouls to PJ Washington. So PJ Washington draws the unenviable matchup of having to guard Joel Embiid tonight.
Yeah, that was a good call out. And Washington a little bit undersized too, so that's not going to be particularly helpful for him. It also kind of hurts his rebounding numbers. Going and playing center improves them, but he doesn't have a great baseline to improve upon. But you're right. He ended up having a good night last night. Devin Vassell ended up coming back after a tough early going there, and then Miller sort of cooled down, but he still had a really good night. So a lot of the same cast of characters going again today. Let's see if we have any other news. Oh, let's see. Nope, we just got the starting lineup. How do you feel about, I don't want to say it, Nicholas Batum? He's kind of a non-entity at this point, correct?
Batum is somebody who is so far from my radar. I mean, he's priced all the way up to 5,200 now, which I think was kind of preventative in case the 76ers rested some guys. But at $5,200 and Batum's only project for 0.1% ownership, as he should be. He is not somebody who I'm remotely considering. We've got him projected for well under 20 fantasy points at 5,200.
Okay. That was he was one of the last guys I had on my list of just kind of keeping tabs on here. Let's see, go back to some questions here. Go to the old Discord.
We got a handful of Discord questions if you want me to start reading those off.
Run with those, that would be lovely.
Yeah, and there is a one question that was pretty interesting in here that I would also like to get Rich's perspective on, and that is on Gregory Jackson, who really did my namesake dirty the other day. Because, I mean, Gregory Jackson, who I really liked on that slate as well, and I avoided some real chalk bombs the other day. Gregory Jackson was a guy who I still landed on and was very much regretting it at the end of the day because I clearly not misunderstood, but misinterpreted how secure his minutes were. Coming off the bench, I thought that Gregory Jackson's minutes were fairly locked in last game because there's so few shot creators on the Memphis Grizzlies, and he's somebody who's shown he's actually capable of scoring. He's carried high usage rates. So I thought that Gregory Jackson the other day was a fairly safe bet for scenarios like cash games, single entry tournaments, even large field at high ownership, because I thought that he was a really good value play. And it ended up being terrible analysis because it's one thing if players just don't play well, but it's another thing if you're just far off on the minutes and the minutes don't end up being there. But we kind of have a similar situation for Gregory Jackson tonight. And I am thinking, and we got a question here from Gang Green, Gregory Jackson, big body Roddy or Aldama for the DK power forward or start over. So my answer is going to be If you just want to pick like the safest guy, probably Santi Aldama. But I think this is a kind of sneaky spot to go back to Gregory Jackson in large field tournaments because there's no reason to think he can't go back to playing the minutes he did a couple of days ago. There's a very wide range of outcomes here. But Rich, what do you make of the backup big men minutes for the Grizzlies? And is this a potential bounce back spot for Gregory Jackson?
Yeah, this is definitely a potential bounce back spot for him. One thing to note from last game, they played Minnesota, which is a really hard matchup for him, obviously with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns being able to guard that position. He also got into foul trouble in his first rotation and just never really got back on the floor, as well as Santi Aldama was playing pretty good that night. So I think what Memphis is going to do more times than not is kind of ride the hot hand there between Aldama and Jackson, who will see more of the minutes. Obviously, if Jackson gets hot, he'll see the bulk share of the minutes. I will note also Chicago gives a ton of open threes up to opponents, which suits him well as Aldama. So again, it's kind of the hot hand, but he's this like rookie that it's hard to gauge exactly what you're going to get from him. He had those two huge games, and I don't think those were flukes by any means. I think this is just all part of like the learning curve in the NBA. And at 4,500, I still have full faith that he's going to smash again more than once. So
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too.
Can I add on to that for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead.
Same team, Vince Williams. Rich, I'm curious about your take on him. I'm obviously playing on Yahoo tonight. I like to chase some of the overlay. He's coming off 3 really good games, should still be in the starting lineup. He's in this great sweet spot, $22 over there, same scoring as FanDuel, 3 points for blocks and steals. How are you looking at him tonight? And he is someone that is kind of a go forward placeholder? Because I think ultimately he's going to get up to, if he continues this, he should get up into the 7,000s pretty regularly on DraftKings.
yeah, I completely agree with you, EMac. Vince Williams is oddly enough kind of becoming like their second best option. I will note too, I don't think we mentioned it, or if we have, I apologize, but Jaren Jackson is technically listed questionable. So that's something to keep an eye on as well tonight to, late swap to more Vince Williams, or obviously Gregory Jackson. But yeah, I love Vince Williams. He's another one I agree with you. It's going to be 7 to 7,500 before too long.
Yeah, and they're missing 8 of their top 10 players from
Yeah,
the start
right,
of the
right.
season. So
It's the G League team and Jaren Jackson at this point.
pretty much. All right, thank you, Greg, for letting me chime in, and thank you very much, Rich, for answering that question. Let's see. You know what, Greg? We should probably sell something before we get to some more news here. I'm thinking it'd be a good idea to tell everybody about BetMGM because right now, if you go over to BetMGM via the link below us here in the YouTube description, wager $5. Once you have your account set up, you will win $158 in bonus bets. That's before your wager even actually settles. And then if that wager wins or loses, doesn't have any impact on those $150. That gets you rolling as we head on towards Super Bowl 58. This is a great way to start building your bankroll, and you want to look for all of these little edges and advantages because they do not last for long. So check that out. That is BetMGM, and that is the bet 5 to win 158 in bonus bets. Any other questions coming in here, Greg?
Yeah, so we've got a handful of ones here in Discord that I could pull up. I believe we have all the super chats answered. And one thing just to clarify that Rich threw into the Discord channel, but it is Tillman that's questionable tonight, not Jaren Jackson Jr. So just to clarify that, but Rich also threw that into the Discord channel here. But let's see what we have as far as other questions that came in here. And one of them is from, where is it? Here we go. Jets World wants to know who is going to be playing the backup point guard for the 76ers tonight with both Beverly and Melton out. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at the Philadelphia 76ers and the backup point guard minutes. Yeah, so they're barren behind Tyrese Maxey for sure. If you go ahead and look at the depth chart, I guess Kelly Oubre is probably going to have to bring the ball up a little bit. They could go
that's
to like
the name that comes to mind, and then Embiid running some stuff out of the high post, maybe. But I think if they're just going to go, Batum can do it in a pinch from the elbow as well.
I mean, so this is not going to be relevant for anybody you want to play in DFS, but maybe like Ricky Council the fourth, like he could play maybe like 2, 3, or 4 minute stints each half. But the answer to your question is that they don't really have anybody who could play point guard minutes behind Tyrese Maxey. So I don't really have a great answer for you. It's probably going to be point guard by committee and then just bringing the ball up the court. Like EMac said, they could just run the ball through Joel Embiid a little bit more. But I don't know. Maybe Rich has a better answer than me on this. I do know that whoever it is that they might give point guard minutes to off the bench, like if they go to Korkmaz or Ricky Council, it's not somebody I want to play in DFS. But how do you see the point guard minutes going? Because it is a very odd thing to try to figure out, Rich.
Uh, yeah, so I agree that Kelly Oubre can do some of the ball handling. Springer's out. Um, Yeah, Terquavian Smith and Ricky Council got a few minutes last game. It's not going to be anything like I wouldn't play either of these guys unless you're just trying to throw like maybe a couple darts into a GPP or something. But Terquavian Smith and Ricky Council can help with that. But for the most part, I don't think you need to really overthink this. It's just going to be Maxi, like EMac said, and B could even just help out on the high post, and then Oubre for the most part, even Tobias Harris a little bit. But there's not going to be any like insane bump to a bench player's minutes that's going to come in and do anything spectacular.
Yeah, so I understand where the question is, especially if somebody's looking at the depth chart and trying to figure out, like, hey, what do I do with the rotation here if you're trying to figure out your own minutes? And it's one of these ones where it's like, yeah, you could give Terquavian Smith some minutes. You give Ricky Council the fourth some minutes. There's apparently three other Ricky Councils. Nobody knows where they are or anything, but there's also three of them out there. Nothing that's going to matter for DFS purposes. And I'm not sure. I don't think there's a real clear answer, but not one that's going to matter for DFS. That is one thing I feel pretty comfortable saying. And then a Miami High Life wants a nuke of the night from EMac. So EMac, I don't think anybody's ever asked for an EMac nuke of the night. What's your answer, EMac?
Oh my goodness. This is there are no rules, if I remember this correctly, but there is an opportunity here. And I would be remiss if I did not bring up Mr. Fred Van Vliet. Some do call him Fred Van Elite. That would be me that calls him that. But he has the perfect profile for tournaments. He has 50 fantasy point upside. He exhibited that throughout his years in Toronto, but he especially does here in Houston. He does enough that it keeps his salary in check, but his dudding is more from a fantasy perspective and not really a team perspective. He's still going to get his minutes, but a lot of times if he's just not feeling it, he's still handing out a lot of assists. And that doesn't help us from a DFS standpoint, but he's all but assured of playing typically 34 to 38 minutes. It's a wider range of outcomes as long as he doesn't get into the occasional foul trouble, which curtails him from time to time where there's a blowout. He still plays a lot of minutes, even though he's on a new team, because he is kind of that steady veteran presence. But I do actually like him in this matchup against Utah. Utah has been a little bit better on defense. Probably helps that Kessler Walker is back for his 20-25 minutes a game, etc. So it's not a gimme by any stretch that it was earlier in the season, but I do like Van Vliet tonight.
Okay, so we got a nuke of the night from EMac as Fred Van Vliet, and I will go back to somebody I mentioned before, Jordan Poole for me. That's the guy I think who has some of the most upside for the lowest price and the least ownership today. So that's an interesting one for me here. And let's see what we have next here. And it is M. Grizzly wants to know favorite leverage play for tournaments. Who is somebody that we like for leverage in tournaments here, EMac, as Jimmy Flick is very close to getting a first round submission, which would be really nice for me here. That aside, we have a favorite tournament leverage play. I don't know if there's somebody that I in particularly really love for or leverage. I mean, there's players I like at low ownership. I'm trying to think if there's somebody particularly for leverage purposes I like. Let me see if there's a high owned guy who maybe have a pivot off of. How about for you? Is there a particular leverage option that you like, EMac?
No, there's not really. I'm just kind of leverage. I usually assume to mean that in place of going, it's like if you were to say, just making this up, Brandon Miller, and say, no, I'm going to go with Gordon Hayward or something like that, where it's guys on the same team. The way things are spreading out tonight, it really doesn't appear that there's a true leverage play. I like Luke Kennard. You brought him up earlier today. A little tougher to get to at 5,200 on DK, but he is $10 on Yahoo. He's in my lineup over there. He's someone I think that is going a little bit overlooked. You're going to have to accept 20, 25 fantasy points. But as Greg pointed out, he is kind of playing point guard. Similar to Philly, they ran out of point guards in Memphis, so they kind of had to go here with Luke Kennard. But he is someone that I like that's going under-owned, but that's really not a leverage. That's a leverage against the field, not a leverage against another player.
Yeah, there's not somebody I really have as like a particular leverage option for the slate. Like there's low owned guys I like, but there's not somebody specific I'm playing to get off of a high owned guy that I think would benefit or anything like that. Well, but I understand what you're talking about there, Mike. But it's the leverage in the Sims tool is it's just like how overweight you are to somebody relative to their ownership, not necessarily like, oh, here's somebody that projects as a good play as leverage off of somebody else. So let's see what else we have in here. We have,
I guess like if Craig Porter really picks up some steam and Sam Merrill loses it, those guys kind of, I would think they would compete for shots. They're both going to be out there a similar amount of time. Porter obviously has better opportunities via assists, etc. But I guess that could be one. It's a tough one today.
Now, oh, by the way, Trae Young is going to be in. So Trae Young, who's listed as questionable, he is in, as well as Bogdan Bogdanovic. We got both the Hawks guys who are in. That's not anything that's really going to dramatically change the slate here because both of them were questionable and now they are in. So good that we got that news.
Victor Wembanyama. He's not being picked. What's the Sims doing with Victor Wembanyama? He's not really being picked up by the optimizer here.
So Victor Wembanyama is currently in a pretty good portion of lineups for me on DraftKings, not on FanDuel. So there are definite reasons to like Wemby today. And one thing that is really interesting to me about him is I think there might be a little bit more of a ceiling for his minutes than people might realize. The reason being is because we've seen a slow trend up in Wemby's minutes, whereas for a really long time here, he was being held to 21, 22, 24 minutes, like pretty low playing times. The last two games, though, 27 and 27 minutes for Wemby. And the last game was a blowout against the Boston Celtics. He still got up to 27 minutes. I'm not going to say that the most likely scenario is that he plays 30 minutes. I think it's within the range of outcomes, considering he's played 27 in back-to-back games. And when you look at the points per minute fantasy production for Wemby over the last month, I don't think that this is a crazy thing to think. Next year, he may lead the entire NBA in fantasy production. He might just lead the league in fantasy points per game average. So if we're going to potentially be getting 30 minutes out of Wemby today, he's actually dramatically underpriced at $8,700 on DraftKings relative to what his upside is. So I like him as a tournament play.
Right. I am going to, I can't quite make it work for him in Yahoo, but I am going to have him on at least half of my DK lineups. Let's make it 60% and I will upload those now. Is there anybody you're terrified that you're not getting enough representation of at the moment here? I know this is when you and Eric are usually adjusting the ROI boosts up and down to kind of finalize the last part of your player portfolio. Is there anybody you're having trouble keeping in your lineups?
Let me think. Is there anybody who's really highly owned that I'm not getting to that scares me? Not really. I would say that, Jalen Green is really popular and I'm coming in underweight to him in my lineups. That's a little scary just because there is the possibility that Jalen Green could have one of those nights where he actually starts to knock down a bunch of his shots. It doesn't happen all that frequently with Jalen Green. He's somebody who I was really high on coming out of the G League and when he was in the draft. Really, really athletic. I thought he had a ton of upside, but he's just been so inefficient over the course of his career that we haven't seen those big games all that frequently. I'm coming in underweight to him. I think he's a little bit over-owned, but I would say he is somebody with a ceiling who, if he does end up screwing me at close to 30% ownership, I could see him being somebody who ruins my night.
I do recall that you did bet him to score 25 or more points for the entire season. last year, or averaged 25 points? Wasn't that
So
what
I
his
had
goal was?
I had a number of different bets on Jalen Green last year. Nice. Jimmy Flick got the finish. There we go. Cash it,
Hey.
guys. So people were upset that I was giving out Jimmy Flick bets, and he just cashed a plus 172, first bet of the night. All right. We can't be too upset about it because it won. All right. So my bets on Jalen Green last year, his over under for points per game, I think opened at 18. So I had over 18 and then a bunch of alt lines on him. So it was like over 18, over 20, over 22. So it ended up being profitable, but he didn't hit like the ceiling ones or anything.
Yeah, I see someone asking in chat real quick. They're asking why are the sims not updated? Typically, if you notice, the projections haven't either. Everything's coming in exactly as we had projected it at this point. There's really been nothing that upset the apple cart since about 45 minutes ago or so. Everything is just coming in as expected. Rare, especially on a Saturday, never will happen on an NBA Sunday, but that just happens to be where we are tonight. That probably means at 7:02 we're going to find out the games at 7:30 and 8 o'clock are doing something different, because that's just how NBA works here. All right. Yeah, nice work on that. Oh, DK tiers. Did you call those up, Greg?
No,
Okay.
but I didn't see any questions coming about it or anything.
Oh, there's been a couple here
Well,
sneaking in the old.
was there was a super chat we missed?
No.
Gotcha. Let's round up though, because we have some questions in Discord that we didn't get to. So let's answer those to finish out the show here. And one of them is from Champino 26. He wants to know, do I like Wembanyama as much as I did this morning? Can you give some low-owned value plays at each position? Yeah, so talked about Wemby a little bit there. I do like Wemby quite a bit for today, coming in overweight to him. As for low-owned value options, all right, let's see. I don't know that I've won at every single position as a low-owned value option, but Craig Porter Jr., here's what I could do. I could do it by guard, forward. I could do it by front court and backcourt. Backcourt for me, that is going to be Craig Porter Jr. I think there's added opportunity for him with Karis LeVert being out. He's not projected for very much ownership. And in the front court, I'm going to go with Gregory Jackson. I think Gregory Jackson is somebody who has big bounce back potential. And it is pretty crazy that just because of one bad game from Gregory Jackson, that he goes from being like 50% owned in tournaments. I think it might have even been 53% last slate. Nothing has really changed from this late to last slate other than he didn't play well last game and therefore didn't really end up getting very many minutes. But for him to go to 50+% owned to 0.2% owned, I think that is a very low owned play that you can get to with some upside. Next one here is M. Bach 005. Last guy is in. Kobe White. Oh, so a 3v3. Kobe White, Vassell, and Champagny, or Green, Caruso, and Barrett. I'm going to go with White, Vassell, and Champagny. I don't necessarily love either of those sides, but I'm going to go with the first one there, M. Bach. The next question is, oh, here we go. We got one from Mr. Westry. Wanted me to run DK tiers lineups. So there we go. There is a question here about the DK tiers. So I will run these really quickly. I actually did have them run coming into the show, but I have a lot of tabs that will be up on my computer over the course of the show. And since I didn't get the tiers questions right off the bat, I ended up closing it thinking we weren't going to get it. But all right, gotcha. I was able to pull it back up here. And all right, so tier 1, Joel Embiid. Tier 2, Julius Randle. Tier 3, Şengün. Tier 4, Nikola Vucevic. Tier 5, your guy, Fred VanVleet. And then tier 6, Emmanuel Quickley for me. So those are my favorite options at each tier. Gang Green wants to know, is Rozier at 7,600 on DK a smash? Yeah, play him for sure with LaMelo Ball out. Kevin Cash App wants to know, would I rather play Randle or Wemby? I prefer Wemby tonight. And then Champino 26, with Memphis playing their B team, would it be crazy to stack Chicago players? Depends what you mean by stack them. I know that Zach LaVine is out, but I wouldn't go and play like 4 players from the Bulls in one lineup today. A couple players from the Bulls, cool. But I wouldn't want to have, especially considering their price points, I wouldn't want to have, say, more than 3 Bulls players in one lineup. And I wouldn't want to have all the expensive guys. So I would want a max of 2 out of like Kobe White, DeMar DeRozan, and Vooch in given lineups. And Maddie T has a question for us. Wants to know McDaniels from Minnesota and Vince Williams or Niang and Barrett on FanDuel. And then also last man in for 6,400 on Owner's Box. All right. EMac, do you want to handle the first question for Maddie, and then I'll look up the owner's box pricing for her?
Yeah,
So
just
the first
fire it up. What was
question,
it
it
again, real
is
quick?
McDaniels and Vince Williams, or Niang and RJ Barrett.
All right, so I'm looking at the same thing right now, and I'm on Yahoo, but I'm going McDaniels and Vince Williams, which is hilarious. That is Jaden McDaniels.
Wait, how do you have the same 2v2 for yourself on how do you have the same 2v2 on Yahoo that she has on
because you've convinced me into going with Victor Wembanyama, so I had to change things around. I lost Jaren Jackson Jr. I kept Şengün. I kept Bagley. I've got Victor. I've got Vince, Luke, Donovan. I'm locked and loaded. Went to the other Jones brother. I went with Trey instead of Tyus, but that was what I was looking at. I'm leaving $2 on the table, but ultimately I'm leaving that route. McDaniel never exciting. Your fingers crossed he gets 20 fantasy points. Sometimes he can disappoint, but he has reared back and thrown up a 30 burger on occasion here. The only challenge with him is he's going against OKC. Rich and I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Like the trajectory here for Vince Williams, the opportunity that is opening up for him because of so many people being injured. I think he is going to be a key guy going forward, and pretty soon he's going to price himself out of our contention, but that would be the side I would land on tonight.
Yeah, so to answer the other part of Maddie's question, I like Vooch the most. Vooch is only 6,000 over on owner's box, so that is my favorite play for that price range.
All right. Now, what a random 2v2 that I was staring at myself. Hey, maybe I have a doppelganger out there in some form or fashion. We've got about 90 seconds left until lock here. We didn't mention a lot about Jared Allen. He is someone I liked. I wrote him up in the free article on the homepage today, but ultimately fell out of the opportunities here, especially with Bagley and Şengün in that one. But he's sort of my one regret that I didn't have to.
Anything else there, EMac?
No,
I can't tell. It's like you're building your lineups sort of out loud.
No, I'm uploaded. I'm good to go.
That
was it. Shocker of shockers. I try to, when I'm on with you, I know you have a little more in play than I do. So I try to be cognizant of that.
Oh, good. Just making sure we've got everybody's questions answered here in Discord. And it looks like we are all caught up here. We're also heading into lock here, EMac. So why don't you bring us out? Any ad reads that you missed? If not, EMac, I think we're good and we can call it tonight.
I think we did hit everything. We talked about the 279 or probably 297. That would be the 30% off the MMA Sims. We talked about signing up for BetMGM, coming in through the link below us here in the YouTube description, going over there, creating your account, betting $5. You're going to get 158 from them no matter what. Then you may win your bet. That's also bonus. And then, of course, we have Odd Shopper out there, $14.95 per week, $49.95 per month. We went over that in more detail on this afternoon show. Next time we are running with about 5 games, we'll break that one down in primetime here, because I think that's an incredibly valuable tool that is out there, especially for the pick'em sites. But with that, I think we're good to go. Thank you, Rich, for joining us on air here. Shout out to producer Mike. You can follow Greg on Twitter at @Ehrenberg DFS. I am at EMac DFS, and of course, it is stochastic_COM. With that, gamers, good luck.